Hey, so it's Dr. Glenn Davies from Reversal NZ Lifestyle Medicine Clinic, coming to you from the greenhouse. So why am I coming to you from the greenhouse? Well, reading a little bit about YouTube, I realized that people either have a green screen or they have a green room. Now, because I'm pretty new to this and I'm sort of making it up as I go along, I thought I'd have a greenhouse. So hence the greenhouse, but also, well, that's kind of because I think being homegrown, sustainable, using natural resources, I think that's pretty much part of what we are at Reversal NZ anyway. But that's a little talk about the greenhouse. Sorry for looking a bit scruffy. I've just been for a walk. So what are we going to talk about this morning? We are going to talk about human interference factor. So human interference factor. Now, that's a term that I first heard Professor Grant Schofield use. You'll know Professor Schofield from the What the Fat series and from Precure. So, when you think about it, if you think back to traditional cultures, all of their food is whole food. And it doesn't really matter about their macros. So if you take the Inuit people, they have a diet almost predominantly protein and fats, and then you can find traditional people in Irian Jaya who have a diet which is entirely vegetables, particularly root vegetables. So it doesn't seem to matter too much about the macros, or as much about the macros. But what's gone wrong in Western society? Why do we have the tsunami of diabetes, of obesity, of chronic health conditions? Why have we a reduction in our health span, even though our lifespan has increased? And I think the problem is that the fact that the food is processed. That's what the term human interference factor means. It's the amount of processing that has occurred. So if you look at those traditional diets, there's very, very little human interference factor. So nothing comes in packets. Food is eaten raw or cooked, but that's about it. You look at the SAD diet, the standard American diet, the standard Australian diet, the standard Aotearoa diet, and it's very, very high in processed food that comes in packets. And why does that matter? Well, the processing seems to make a huge difference. And you would have noticed I've talked a lot about hormones. So the environment impacting on hormones and impacting on health. What you're seeing with human interference is that we've changed the food environment, we've changed the food, and the body responds differently. And I heard Ivor Cummings do a talk where he talked about this fascinating experiment. So they had two groups of rats, and they gave them exactly the same amount of food and exactly the same food. The only difference was that in one group of rats, they had turned the rat chow, the rat pellets, into a powder. That was the only difference. And then they monitored those rats, and the rats that were having the powder, they got fatter and sicker than the rats that was having the pellet. And when you think about our traditional understanding, well, our understanding for the last 40 years that it's all about calories, which of course it's not. How does that make any sense? Because it's the same calories. But what's happened, turning it into a powder, has affected the way it's absorbed. It causes it to be absorbed higher in the gut. Now, this influences some hormones, so GLP-1 and GIP, and that influences hunger, influences insulin, influences other hormones like leptin, and that changes the physiology and metabolism of the body. So changing it from pellets into a powder makes a difference. So, turning wheat into flour makes a difference. Turning corn into high fructose corn syrup makes a difference. Turning oils into margarine makes a difference. Every step in processing makes a difference. So what we're about, we're encouraging you to eat whole foods, and the minimum amount of processing. So if it doesn't have a food label at all, think of a food label as a warning label. If it doesn't have a food label at all, it's much healthier than a food that has a warning label. Okay, the least number of ingredients. So if it only has 3 ingredients, it's much better than if it has 10 or 20 ingredients, particularly if you can't pronounce them or their numbers. So what should you do? If you can grow your own food, fantastic. If you're shopping in the supermarket, shop around the outside of the supermarket. So you're going to go through the vegetable section, you're going to go through the meat, the fish, the dairy products, and you're going to walk out. Even better, if you can shop from a greengrocer and a butcher, far, far better. So we live in the real world. I'm not suggesting that you will have zero processed food, but try and have the least amount of processing, the least human interference factor, and try if you can to eat whole foods, and if you can, make your own compost, if you can grow your own vegetables, even better, because we know that the mineral content of the vegetables that you grow yourself is going to be much higher than the ones that you buy, simply because there's more minerals in the soil if you've been composting it yourself. Okay, so a little bit of talk about human interference factor. Try and make your food as whole food as you possibly can. Cheers.